Please rise for the invocation by Councilman Henderson, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Father, for your grace and your goodness and your love for us and your help that we so desperately need day in and day out. Lord, we do ask for your blessings on this city. We pray that you would provide protection for us, for those that serve here and work so tirelessly to keep us safe. But we pray for our homes and our families, that you would continue to protect us from violence, from harm. Lord, we ask for your wisdom. Please guide us as we try to raise the next generation, as we raise our own children in our own homes. Lord, give us the wisdom that we need to build a solid community right here. And then, Lord, in these chambers, we ask that you would give us wisdom to make decisions, wise decisions for the citizens of Williamsport here. Lord, may we understand the gravity of the decisions that we make. Lord, give us wisdom to use the taxpayer money well and appropriately. Help us to know what we should and should not do. Lord, protect us from selfishness and from pride. Guard us against political agendas. And Lord, make us servants and not tyrants. And guide us, please, in this meeting. And then, Father, on a personal note, as one of your children, on this Passion Week, I thank you for sending your Son to pay the death penalty that we all deserve. And I thank you that you raised him from the dead as a sign of your satisfaction. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Next item on the agenda is approval of City Council meeting minutes dated March 15th, 2018. Can I have a motion and a second to approve those minutes?
So moved. Second.
Carried, motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, those are approved. Next item on the agenda is limited courtesy of the floor. We've had no request for that this evening, so we'll move on to the ordinance for... As I'm sure you were just, was just mentioned to you at the end of the meeting, please. The ordinance in final reading, Article 1741. Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance, Article 1741, International Property Maintenance Code.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance in final reading?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Jordan, how are you this evening?
Good. How are you, Dr. Williamson? Members of council. The only thing I want to add to it is that I did make the recommended two changes that were asked of the council last reading. The two sections they were added concerning the two different times of the year that we do allow debris to be put in the street. And the other one was already in it, but I put it part of the original, I forget exactly which one it was, but we did add that one also to it. The,
Just to clarify, that was done by amendment at the last meeting?
that's correct.
Thank you.
Yep. And the only other thing is the 2015 is what we adopted, and the sections go into that. Every 3 years, the International Property Maintenance Code is updated by the International Code Council. We'll have a 2018 coming out. It comes out towards the end of the year. What I can do, though, review it. If there's anything we want to, we'll just take it out of that and add it to this book instead of changing this whole entire book again. It's just easier to do it that way, unless they come up with some major changes that we need to look at, but we should be fine.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, on the ordinance in final reading, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the ordinance is approved in final reading. Mr. Girardi, while you're up there, why don't we go ahead and just knock out all of your agenda items? So we'll move down to next item on the next relevant item on the agenda, demolition for 641 Maple Street.
Yes. What you have before you is a request from UPMC for the structure located at 631 Maple Street in an institutional zoning district. It was used for a single-family dwelling, currently vacant, and it would be, grass will be planted, or seed will be planted once it's demolished and seed.
All right, thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the application for demolition?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Comments or questions? And you have a representative here.
Yes, we do have a representative here.
Any comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the application for demolition is approved. We'll go ahead and move to certificates of appropriateness listed under your name. First one is for 353 Pine Street for Dave Rizzo.
Is this for the auto one we're doing first? Because he has two.
Yeah, we'll
Yep.
go ahead and do the auto one, yeah.
All right. We have a request here to erect 3 wall-mounted signs. The signs are 1/4-inch polymetal. I have attached a photo for the location of the sign, size of the signs, and design color. The signs do meet all zoning requirements. You have 2 sheets attached to it. The first sheet, I believe you have, is the one looking from 4th Street into the building. And then the other one would be looking up 4th Street towards City Hall. What they're really doing is changing the name from Autos to Otto. Leaving off the S.
Can I have a motion and a second to approve the certificate?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Mrs. Katz?
Yes, one of the interesting things is, first of all, Otto's was established in 1841. And what they're doing now with their sign is they're really bringing it back to what the original name was registered under in 1941, which is the Otto Bookstore. And as bizarre as it sounds, there is another Otto's bookstore in Pennsylvania. So, which when they wanted to register, they found that out. And when they really started digging, they found out that the original name was registered. I know we'll probably all still call it Otto's, but the name registered in 1941 was the Otto Bookstore.
Interesting. Other questions, comments? One of the things that Ms. Girardi, you and I spoke about earlier is kind of connected to our long-standing challenge of helping everyone to be educated about the process and the order in which things have to occur. Unfortunately, with the new owners, they might have missed that educational experience that we've done over the last few years, and I know that these signs are already up, and
Correct.
Under our current ordinance, that catches them under having to pay a bit
The
more
double
for the
fee.
fees.
Correct.
So, ignorance of the law is whatever they say about that, no excuse, but, you know, in this case, given that they're new owners, it's unfortunate that that happened, but we
Right.
enforce the law consistently, and
Right,
so-
that's, as long as we do it consistently, it's kind of unfair because I don't, but it is what it is. We
It
have,
is what it is, and, but the only reason I bring it up here is so that, you know, if that one other person who's thinking about putting up a sign can hear it and be educated that they need to get the certificate before they put up the sign, they'll save themselves some money.
correct. Now, there will sometimes occasions do occur, and I will say this, that somebody will come in and request to put a sign up, and it'll take 30 days to go through the process, and it's a new business. Sometimes we will allow them to put the sign up, as long as we know it looks like it should meet the ordinance, and they are realizing that if it doesn't, they would have to take it back down and do something to it. A lot of times, people like to advertise their business, and
Sure.
sometimes waiting 30 days is not a good thing to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think the requirement is they apply for it
Correct.
before they put it up, right? Right. Thank you. If there are no other comments or questions, Ms. Frank, on their certificate, please? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just one little question. Along the same lines, I noticed that there was a relocation of a restaurant on 4th Street that erected some new signage. Wanted to make sure that did we, it's possible I missed it. Did we approve that signage or have we not yet?
This is on court?
On
For the
4th,
Mexican restaurant?
the Mexican restaurant on 4th that moved across the street. Yeah. Did we approve the signage for that?
They took down a sign, they put up a temporary one right now, we have not, that's not their permanent signage.
Okay.
But you're talking about the little ones out front?
Sorry, Joe. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Anyway, okay, so we've dealt, we know what's going on there. and
That's
we're not-
correct.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Just wanted to check. It seems to me, I drove down 4th Street, there may have been, thank you, Jonathan. There may have been something else too, but anyway, just wanted to make sure that we were sort of informing people when they were coming down changing business locations or things like that, that we needed to approve it. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, on the certificate, please.
Ms. Mealy?
I think so. Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, that certificate is approved. Next item is certificate of appropriateness also for 353 Pine Street, connected to the CPA's office.
Yes, one thing I did forget, all these were reviewed and recommended for approval through the Planning Commission to City Council. The next one is a sign for the same location. This is on Pine Street for Nancy Mortgage, CPA. Sorry, it's not Nancy, it's Nancy Montaigne? Is that how you say that?
That's why I said the CPA's office.
Okay, request to erect one wall-mounted sign. The sign will be facing Pine Street, I believe. The sign is made of 1/4 inch polymetal. I did attach a photograph showing the location, the colors, and so forth of the sign. We do not have a representative for this one nor the other one because of the holiday that came up. They could not make it. Demolition is required by the ordinance. Certificate of appropriateness usually aren't required. We do like to have a representative there, especially if there is something major that they would need to answer. So hopefully I can answer any questions on these two signs that are left.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve their certificate? So moved.
Second.
Hearing motion and a second, comments or questions? No major questions, apparently. Mrs. Frank, on the second certificate.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the certificate is approved. Next certificate is for 215 East 3rd Street, Black Arts Holdings.
Yes, this request is for another wall-mounted sign. Sign's 75 feet in length, 32 inches tall, total 200 square feet, which meets the sign requirements for the city of Williamsport. It's a sign made of high-performance vinyl. I have attached a picture of the sign, what it's going to look like. If you were to peel that sign off, it's not on now, but if you take that off there, you're going to see a black tar line that goes all the way down along that building. That's where a roof used to butt up against it, and typically they cove it in and they tar it. Well, there's a big tar line. He's trying to hide that tar line, so he's going to do an advertisement, and that's what you're going to see. Okay? So it's really there for a couple different reasons.
Okay. Comments, or I'm sorry, a motion and a second?
So move.
Second?
Hear a motion and a second to approve the certificate. Comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and that certificate is also approved.
Thank you.
Mr. Nard, do you have a representative? Yeah, we'll go ahead and take care of that. So the next item on the agenda is a lot consolidation and land development plan for 105 Maynard Street.
Good evening. The following request is a proposed land development plan for Sheets Incorporated. It's located at 105 Maynard Street. It is located within the CC zoning district. The current land use is an existing convenience store. The proposed land development would consist of demolishing of the existing stores as well as the old Vincenzo building. As part of the land development approval process, we're requesting that the demolition process also go through the approval during the same time versus us bringing it back for a demolition permit. In addition, we're going to do a lot consolidation of 2 parcels that would create a residual lot of 2.38 acres. In addition, Sheets Incorporated would dedicate a .051 acres of a right-of-way along Maynard Street, side of the south parcel. A new convenience store consisting of 5,988 square feet and fuel islands. The plan also proposes to remove existing landscape, pavement, lighting, and signage to be replaced with a new layout, which we have provided to you. The layout would provide for increased parking as well as outdoor seating. The plan does meet all zoning, stormwater requirements, and was reviewed by the city engineer as well as myself. The County Planning Commission did review it, and they did provide comments. You do have the comments. I just want to reiterate that the plans that you have in front of you are the corrected comments already. So the comments have been completed, and you do have the correct plans. It also was reviewed by our Planning Commission with positive recommendation.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion and a second to approve these items?
So move.
Second.
Hear a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Ms. Mealy?
Thank you. Just a couple. First off, a solicitor we can approve all these items, the land development, the lot consolidation, and the demolition, all in one single approval. Okay, good. The right-of-way that Sheets is dedicating back to the city, what are we utilizing that?
It's just a small portion, basically, where what it is we would maintain that in case we needed it for any lighting or anything, in addition to with rails and trails that may be coming through there, so it just gives that ability to utilize
So
it.
it's a potential bike lane.
Correct.
Is it currently street, or is it currently,
It's
what's currently in the right
inside,
way?
it's inside the sidewalk area.
Okay, got it. So it's going to stay sidewalk for the time being?
Correct.
Okay, got it. That is to say, we don't need to reconstruct it in any way. It's, okay,
Right.
It is what it is. Okay, good. And the new outdoor seating at the Sheets, this is just for information. Will people be allowed to sit out there and drink? Will it be, because I know Sheets will be selling
If they
beer,
go
I'm
through a
assuming.
process through PLCB as far as liquor, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
They would have to go through the process through PLCB. If the PLC does approve it, again, you know, I mean, we normally basically, as long as it's closed off, it would meet our requirements.
Got it, yeah, so that was just part of my question. So basically, so we could now at this point have people, say, drinking beer outside of Sheets?
We're not sure that's what their intent,
Yeah,
but it is
might
for
not be,
outdoor seating.
Right, okay. That'll make that corridor a little more interesting. And one last question, just for my information, because I'm curious. When we do a tear down on two different sites, obviously we had a Sheets as well as a restaurant and a real estate office there, correct?
Correct.
When we consolidate those parcels, when Sheets installs a new, bigger, better store, tax-wise, what does that do to our tax base? Does it do?
You'd probably have to talk to Nick Grimes on that.
Do we have any way to get a sense of that before the project goes through? I'm just curious because we're losing, you know, we're changing three businesses into one business, but it's one bigger business. I just would, yeah, anyway.
I just think basically, like I said, I don't think that basically it would affect the taxes one way or the other. I mean, it's
Got it.
it's an entity that they're going to own.
Okay, I will ask Nick about that. I just,
I can reach out to Nick and then follow back up with council.
if you don't
possibly.
mind, I'd appreciate it.
I can do that.
It's not going to affect the way that I vote one way or the other. It sounds like this will be a nice improvement to the area, but I'd be curious to know for future information, I
Okay.
guess. And one last question. Have we reached out to the Penn College students and told them about what's going to happen?
No, again, I don't believe it. I don't believe it this
Because
time.
it's going to be a rough little bit. And I feel like maybe we should do some sort of public information campaign on campus.
Survival kits.
Right. But, okay, that's everything. Thanks very much, Mr. Nahr.
Mrs. Katz?
Is it just, these are some of the renderings of.
They
it,
are
right?
the renderings of basically the property.
The fueling station, I take it you're representing Sheets. Are the fueling stations, are they being changed or are they staying where they are right now?
They,
Trying to look at this, I couldn't,
They're moving from what would be the northern side of the site to the southern side of the site.
they will go
Okay.
down towards where Cedarcog Rail is. So the islands will be relocated, basically, if you're looking at sheets currently here, they'll be located this way.
which is going to be a heck of a lot better for getting in and out of there, because that has been awfully dangerous when everybody's trying to pull in there and pull out, which is going to be good.
Well, on that access drive that comes on the northern portion, through working with staff, we created a curved area so it's not a wide open expanse.
Okay.
It's narrowed down to prevent traffic.
So they, yep.
Which will be, because that was also very confusing, because you didn't know where Sheets began and the road started or ended. So it was very confusing. So therefore, that's going to be more of an easy way to do it with the curve going around there. Because getting into Wendy's also and the other business, the car wash that's back there,
Right.
I mean, it was just very congested at times. So I think this is going to be, you know, much better all the way around. So the store is going to be increased by how many feet, square feet?
It'll be a total of 5,988 square feet,
What is it now, would you say roughly?
I would say we're right around 30.
30, 38 somewhere, yeah.
So that's really increasing it quite a bit.
There's obviously the incorporation of indoor seating, which takes up a lot of that space.
And where are you putting the seating?
It's fronts, well, this is a new store design, there's only two built throughout our whole footprint. And it's more of an incorporated dining room, dining
Oh, see, I thought you were doing also outside seating.
There will be
That's
both,
what
a
I'm
combination of both.
That's where you're going to put the outside seating. Is that going to be on north or south?
South.
Near the fuel? Where the
It's on the
fuel-
south side.
Okay. Because I noticed the one that you have up on the Golden Strip is on the front of the store. And that looks kind of congested too, I'm going to tell you. Okay? So, but this is going to look really good in that area at this point to bring that down. But I'm happy you're changing this around because, like I said, it was kind of congested there. So thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Mr. Allison?
Mr. Nar, you said the changes were all incorporated. The one comment was that the secondary access easement from the Early Bird Car Wash was, it
Reason
said it
why-
had been moved.
Yeah,
but-
reason why is because basically if they did not remove it, it basically walks through the building. So the new building, basically what it walks through is, but we will have a copy of, we will have a recorded easement once the land development goes through. It's just if they kept the current easement that they have with Early Bird, it would go right through the middle of the new existing
Okay.
store.
So it's just going to be.
Correct.
Okay, and then, as far as, I mean, the green space around it and,
It meets all the zoning and land development requirements.
okay, is it increased at all from what it is?
It'll be a little bit of an increase as far as the greenery.
Okay. I was just wondering for some of the MS4 things, if there was,
It wouldn't fall under the MS4 as far as a credit, no.
no, but as far as in general for the area. I noticed the one down in Loyalsock had a big,
BMP retention pond area?
on the left, well, I guess it'd be the north side of it. I didn't know if there was going to be anything like that.
No, there won't be.
Okay.
Other comments or questions, Ms. Mealy?
Yeah, just a few more from me along those lines. Does this meet our landscaping requirements?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Even though it's only showing lawn, will there be plantings as well?
Correct.
Or there will be plantings?
Page,
Sorry, I didn't make it all the way back through all the documentation.
there is one
I see it
on
evergreen.
page 9 of 24.
Okay, thank you. All right. And in terms of exterior, Mr. Nar, will there be substantial differences between the current exterior? I mean, I'm assuming that we're still looking at the large red awning over the,
Are you talking the exterior? I'd
Yeah.
have to defer to Sheets.
visually speaking, will the store continue to look similar to what, I haven't been down there in a while, will it continue to look?
This is actually the elevation views of what you'll see, what it will look like.
Right, exactly. I guess what I'm asking
It means
is.
the awning.
Yeah, I mean the awnings, it'll still be kind of a large red awning over the fuel?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, yeah.
To move it outside of traffic issues was, we try and push it away from any other residential, commercial,
Got it. So at this point, the building will kind of block light pollution from residential areas further into the city. Okay, that'll certainly, I think, be an improvement. Got it. And brick, is that the material?
Correct.
I know that that we don't approve that as part of this process, but just for my own information.
It's just our standard Sheets design.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Just a couple on mine. Going back to the issues of traffic flow, I agree with Mrs. Katz that is that a road that goes, is it a city's, who owns the street that comes off of Maynard in towards Wendy's?
It's an easement agreement for the entities that go back through there.
But the road itself is, the underlying owner is Sheets? Or, because it doesn't show exactly on here.
It's an access road, basically, that they all have access.
They
as far
all
as
have
yes.
access to it. And what about the parking lot on the very north side, the strip of parking?
I believe that is the college.
College, okay. Anyway, the traffic flow in there will help, but I'm trying to make sure I understand the traffic flow within the lot itself. Most of it will come in on that road off
Yep.
of Maynard
Yep, when you-
through the lot?
Yeah, when you come in through there, normally right now where you see it is currently, you can go in and kind of, as soon as you turn in that parking area,
Yeah, it's
you
a
can go.
free-for-all.
That's the issue of the islands. It's going to push it back towards the Wendy's back there, so that'll be the only way they'll be able to come in as far as that way. And they will be able to come in from down on Maynard Street. So
Oh,
in
they
other words,
will be
instead
able
of-
to come
Instead
in
of being able to turn there at
directly
the
off of
light, they'll be
Maynard.
able to go down a little bit further and turn directly into the fuel islands as well.
So is the idea then that if you're going essentially to the convenience store / restaurant, you'd more likely come on the north side? If you're going to fuel, you'll be coming in off,
What it's designed to do is catch the interstate traffic and coming from South Williamsport. That's where the bulk of it will come up through. It's just those entities that are coming from north of Maynard Street
Yep.
have that access to either turn in right there or
Right.
go down to the next area and turn in there.
I'm glad I'm asking, and there's probably an answer, but now that brings up a little bit even more important question. Right now, you cannot get into the site except off of the light.
Correct.
Now you're going to be getting into the site if you're going for fuel by turning left, essentially across.
No, you won't be able to go in that way. You'll only be able to get off of Maynard Street and go right. You won't be able to come up Maynard Street north and
Yep.
turn in there. You'll have to go up to the light.
You only be able
You
to
can
turn
only-
into the
from off of
fueling
Main- yep,
station if you're
from the
coming
southern
from
side
south.
of- yep.
That's important.
Correct.
How will that be, how will people be prevented from turning left off of Maynard into the lot?
The do not enter signs.
Okay. And then the traffic flow within the site, how will people, I mean, again, I'm comparing it to what's there now, and I know that if you're driving off of the north access road and you're coming down to, say, the most southern of the fueling stations, especially close to the building, you've got all those people coming in and out for food, and, you know, pedestrian safety is a part of it. Now, all of the fueling traffic,
It'll
Wow.
it'll come in and they'll be able to, I believe they'll be able to come in. See, where am I? They'll be coming in here.
Yep.
They'll come in and out around here. And I believe this out in here, they'll be able to come down on the eastern side. Or
Oh, they will.
western side. So they'll be able to come down the western side.
okay,
to come in.
avoiding all of the pedestrians.
Correct.
Yeah,
And
okay,
the reason why it was also designed this was it would allow the truckings to come in off of that western side
okay.
to go in there.
I wasn't sure if that was
So they'll
intended
have-
to be a public thoroughfare or
Correct.
sort of a hidden behind the building space. And then, this is just for my own interest, how many fueling stations are there now? And it looks like there's fewer now, right?
It's the same amount. Yeah.
Oh, it is?
Just reconfigured, because a lot of it, they're is a lot smaller.
Yeah,
I
it
want
looks
to
like-
say 8.
I think there's 8 MPDs, and we're
Yep.
replacing 8 MPDs.
That's what I thought.
Just under one
One instead of two, which is probably a higher dollar per square foot or something like that. I mean, the business reasons as much as anything.
just site configuration, and we don't connect our canopies to our sewers anymore.
Okay.
It's a standalone canopy, and it just worked out to double stack for.
But you'll be able to handle as many fueling vehicles at the same time as you are now. Because I mean, that place, every, what'd you call them? MPEs, new acronyms all the time. Now we're in the know, it's multi-product dispensers. I mean, right, just to serve the people who use it, it'll be good to know that that'll still be there. But the rest of it, I was just wanting to make sure that we had thought about safety coming off the Beltway and then also for pedestrians, so thanks.
We initially what we do is we require a reviewed design. It's reviewed by both Bureau Codes. Rebecca reviews it, myself review it, and then we basically go back with them and say, here are some of our questions or concerns, and they may modify them at that time, and that was the process that it went through.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Any other questions, Ms.? Yeah, absolutely. We should have done this a long time ago, but we record this, it's on television, so if you could go to the microphone just for, And for Mrs. Frank, I can hear her in the back of my head going, can I have your name and affiliation for the record?
Sure. My name is Brian Dingus. I'm with Sheets Incorporated in the Real Estate Department.
Thank you so much.
Speaking to the landscaping, sometimes there's an issue with grass. You said the grass there. We lay sod and we irrigate. So it's irrigated all summer long, lawn care maintenance. But the sod, it's an immediate effect as opposed to planting grass and, the straw and everything blowing around. So it will look very nice day one.
That's great.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Katz?
We forgot the most important question. When does this start, and when is the timeline when you'll reopen?
Still to be decided. A little bit of it was depending upon how the process went through the city, and so far so good. Everything's gone well, and staff has been great to work with. We probably, with a good outcome, will move this up sooner, and we are cognizant of the college timing and such, and a lot of our customers come from there. So we would ideally like to have the bulk of the downtime during the summer and try to get it open as quickly as we can as the students come back.
In
So
the fall.
that's the goal.
Your goal is in the fall, then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I heard something about so much better place to do business in the city than any other projects that you've had to deal with in the surrounding area. But I don't want to put words in your mouth because, we're a
Terry's been-
business-friendly place.
Terry's been intimately involved, and she's alluded to that it's really gone well.
Great,
So thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, on the land consolidation, land development plan, and I believe demolition.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter.
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Dr. Williamson.
Yes, and all of those things are approved. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda then is an ordinance amending the administrative code. Mrs. Frank, please.
An ordinance amending the administrative code of the codified ordinances, providing for the specific areas of the city government which will operate within the various departments. Should I keep on?
No, short form is fine. I can have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance in first reading, please.
So moved.
Hear your motion and a second. Ms. Page, how are you?
Good, and you?
Good.
Good evening, members of council. In front of you is an ordinance amending or authorizing an amendment to the administrative code of the codified ordinance, providing for the specific areas of city government which we will operate within the various departments. As advised by the Finance Committee during our meeting on Tuesday, a revision was made to change River Valley Transit to Williamsport Bureau of Transportation, DBA River Valley Transit. This amendment is brought forward to you as the administration is working to review and update sections within the Code of Codified Ordinances to comply with current operations, and was prepared in consultation with Solicitor Lubin.
Thank you very much. And reviewed by Finance, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Neal?
Actually, I was late to the Finance Committee meeting, and Mr. Allison and Mrs. Katz covered this before I arrived.
Mr. Allison?
You jumped in.
I did, indeed. And I will happily jump in again, but
Yes, we did discuss this at Finance. We had some questions. That the amendment was suggested by Councilwoman Mealy. And we talked in not specific areas, although there's some changes made in the organization under each director section. Director of Administration, Director of Public Safety, and then Department of Community Development. Mostly in this first one, I looked at the old ordinance, and there was only finance and, help me with this, Ms. Page, it was the engineering, River Valley Transit, or recreation and public works were under contract services, is that correct?
That is correct.
That's what you
Yeah.
said.
So that was rearranged, and we talked about some of those things that were moved around, but then we got into a discussion about Director of Administration, Director of Public Safety. Is there a job description for those positions? Because they could be filled by someone, and it would be a paid position, obviously. And does it just revert to the mayor, or does the mayor do the responsibilities just revert to him if no one's put in that position? Or what does it mean for the mayor to assign him, not just our mayor, but, a current mayor, but for any mayor to assign himself those positions? Because I did get some detail about, we did have a director of public safety for a couple years under Mayor Wolf, and I looked at what that person did, and there is quite an extensive list of responsibilities. It wasn't just directing the police, the fire, and the codes. This particular person belonged to different organizations in the state, was involved with them, was active, that dealt with public safety, had training sessions, conducted training sessions, and made sure, kind of oversaw all those areas that affected each one of those departments. So, it's just a question of what does it mean to have a person in that position, and what does it mean if you don't have a qualified person in that position? And I mean, by experience and by training and education, then does that mean anything? It's not just a title to be filled by someone, because in actuality, it doesn't, the responsibilities of those positions aren't really realized if it's just a title. So since it's an ordinance, if it was just mundane kind of, well, this is how we're organizing, but this is an ordinance and this is a law, and we felt since we're passing a law and amending a law, it's important that at least we have that discussion about what the Director of Administration, Director of Public Safety, and the Department of Community and Economic Development, what does that mean? And obviously, we're not going to necessarily solve all that tonight, but I think it's something we need to be thinking about. What are options? What are alternatives? And I'm not suggesting we spend a lot of money to put somebody in those positions, but it's something to be considered as far as how would the city be best run. So, and that's a lot what we talked about. Mrs. Katz?
One of the things, and I think, Mr. Nichols, you talked about this, that, God, I'm getting the eyebrows. What you talked about was in Mary Wolf's administration, that did she take away or she added one of the directors? I can't remember what you said now. I didn't.
Yeah, when Mayor Wolf came in, when she was elected, then she came up with the approach to reorganize the directorships and reduce the number from 4 to 3. So it went from Director of Public Safety, Community Development, Public Works, Public Services, and Finance and Personnel. And so 2 remained, but the Finance and Personnel and the Director of Public Works were sort of combined into the Department of Administration.
And you have the previous ordinance that shows how that was sort of worked out.
Okay, the question I have is it important to have those titles? Because what this is boiling down to is just a title. There's no job description, there's nothing that's being activated within that name director of. Is that part of what we have to have?
I guess really what it boils down to, though, is once the mayor appoints a department head, they pretty much serve and do the duties of whatever assigned by the mayor, in addition to administering the entities that are within their department. The case law is clear that if there is no department head, the mayor is then effectively the department head.
So really, being the mayor, he is already in charge of and head of all the departments.
Well, he's in
anyhow.
charge of the departments under our charter and under the optional third-class city charter law. If there is no department head, the mayor, by default becomes the department head.
But we do have department heads in I think every department at this point, so.
Well, there's only 3 departments. I know we call recreation a department, we
Right.
call other entities departments, but under our charter, there really, or our ordinances, there are only really 3 departments, even though we use the word department head somewhat loosely.
Okay. Now, I do have something to ask here. The ordinance that was placed before us on Tuesday, this has been changed with what's presented to us now. On page 1, under Public Works, why is engineering an A? Why is that going under Public Works instead of its own department?
It's,
That
what
was-
had been presented,
But that's not how we were presented on Tuesday.
what it is they're moving engineering from community development to Department of Administration. Engineering before, because John Grado held the 2 positions, and no longer being here, they're moving the engineering to the Department of Administration from community development. That's the only reason to put it under the other entity.
But see, under Public Works, it's going A, okay? On the one that we
What
had on.
Bonnie's saying is the one that we reviewed on Tuesday.
On Tuesday.
Had 6 departments
right.
under Director of Administration.
you.
Excuse me,
Yes,
Bonnie, for
yes.
interrupting. Now, the copy that we're looking at is showing 5 departments.
That I hadn't noticed.
River Valley Transit being the 5th, engineering now being a subhead of Public Works. And that was also not in the documentation we reviewed on Tuesday.
Then there'd have to be a separate amendment for that, along with the change of the name for Bureau of Transportation.
I'd like to know why this was changed.
I have no idea. I
Yeah.
couldn't
Well,
answer that.
If I could just offer some overall comments. There was a difficulty there because with John Grado being here so long, he held 2 positions most of the time. That was engineer and, one time, director of public services. And one time, he was director of community development and engineer in both cases. So it was the mayor's decision to sort of go back to the model where the engineer was part of Public Works. And I think there was just a mistake or typo where it should have been under Public Works, as a subset, the engineer under Public Works. So that's why you got a sort of a revision to that, or a typo. It was a typo when we typed up the original ordinance.
Do we, just to clarify, if we're correcting a typo, do we need to, as council, pass that as an amendment?
Well, except that it's in the version that was just approved on first reading, though.
We haven't
We
approved
haven't
anything
approved
yet.
anything.
I mean,
on
this
first-
was
Oh,
that's part of first reading.
Moved. It
Both
has-
of them are really part of the first reading.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Both of the changes are part of the first reading.
In other
So you
words,
can
the
affect
motion on the floor includes the changes
Yes.
related to RVT and to the typo.
The engineering.
Okay.
If I could just offer another observation, so there's not, hopefully, a lengthy discussion about job descriptions, who does what, and we have the Director of Administration, which is vacant or being held by the mayor, the Director of Public Safety, which is vacant or being held by the mayor. You've got all the responsibilities, both those directors are not just not happening,
what happens when you have that situation, they're just filled by the employees in all those different partners, so, or departments. So all the things that the Director of Administration was doing, under the mayor's model, he's doing some of them, and then he assigns the rest of the responsibility he's not doing to others. So it's just sort of spread out.
Occur, but just without
Instead of,
supervision.
and what he's more decentralized than the Maryville centralized version, if that makes any sense.
So just to, I mean, Ms. Katz, don't forget where you were, but just to clarify, under the changes, there are 3 departments. Administration, public safety, and community economic development. Each of the, and we don't have a term for it except for in specific instances like the Bureau of Police and Bureau of Fire, but each of the, I'll call them sub-departments, then none of them have a department head under strict usage of the term department, except for community and economic development. And so, for example, as a sub-department
So under public safety, he's
manager,
making the chief work a lot harder.
the chief
And he's more than willing to do
works without
that.
supervision, that would, with the director of public safety, oversee both he and Mr. Jardy and Chief Heckman. Similarly, as director of finance, we have people out doing things, and director of human resources out doing things without a direct supervisor other than the mayor. And there's a layer of, I mean, one of the things I know, I think, I wasn't in the military, but I know military supervision is there's only so many people an individual can directly supervise effectively. But by taking on, I've never been comfortable with the idea that he also has these titles, because then it brings to council questions, well, does he also get a salary for each one of these titles that he has? But by taking on those responsibilities, we'll say, he then is in the position to be directly supervising many more people than if there were 3 cabinet-level department heads that then would supervise, in the case of public safety, 4 sub-departments. In the case of administration, 5 sub-departments. And in the case of community and economic development, 5 sub-departments. Am I accurately representing the effect of leaving 2 of the 3 department head positions
Again,
empty?
he's held some of the responsibilities, but then assigned others in those titles to sub-departments, heads,
And
such
so
as the
what
chief
you're,
myself.
what you're then saying is the job descriptions, in essence, the job responsibilities are not reflected anywhere in our law, but are instead subject to the whims of the CEO of the administration, right?
In any job, the job descriptions we have, the typical last line is, and anything else you're assigned.
Okay. Mrs.
So
Katz,
the mayor has
back to you.
used that
Sorry.
extensively.
Sorry
Well,
for,
now we understand that there's no money involved here.
Right,
We were just, questioning, is this just a title, or is there, the job description of how it's all going to flow? The thing that does bother me, though, is the engineering. I mean, is this going to, since it's now under Public Works, knowing how the engineering department was working with John Grado, so much more was done as far as funding, grants, and things like that. I don't, I don't, I'm having difficulty understanding this.
That was actually approved during the budget sessions when the Assistant General Manager of Public Works was consolidated with the engineer position, and it was made into one position.
So therefore, all right, okay, the person who has the most experience with engineering, as far as everything goes, would be Rebecca. Adam has a different sort of expertise. So therefore, it's, how is this working? Who's in charge of who? I guess that's what I'm saying.
The general manager is in charge,
So the general manager is,
is Adam Winder.
is Adam Winder. But Adam does not have the qualifications in a lot of the different areas.
Well, you could say, may I?
Yeah,
May I speak?
yeah,
Okay.
I mean, he's very good. He's very good at what he does.
I apologize for being tardy. It's Holy Thursday, and I was with my family. But you have that in other positions. He's a manager. He's overseeing the person. You could say the same thing in other departments that certain individuals, like a mechanic. Maybe the general manager doesn't have a lot of skills in being a mechanic. You have somebody in community development that may have an expertise in a specific area. He's a manager. He's overseeing. So that's ultimately the responsibility, just like my position as well. I have department heads. I oversee them. When you're finished, I would like to add a couple other comments about this ordinance.
Okay.
If I may.
The only thing is, for the past several years that I've been on Public Works, one of the interesting things with Public Works has been John Grado and everything that he presented to us. I don't think Adam's going to be able to present some of these things, okay?
Correct.
Okay.
The engineer has autonomy over her position when it comes to engineering and the expertise, but ultimately, she has to answer to somebody. And she answers to Adam, who's actually the general manager of Streets and Parks. So that's the way that it has been working. I believe it's been working pretty well. At the same time, we're multitasking, as we said, and we're saving dollars. And we have to do that in government. For us to continue to keep our taxes to where they are, instead of constantly raising. And if you look at other cities, and I've done those research, they have so many more employees in their offices. I mean, even with the finance, and I want to give kudos to Mr. Nichols and Mr. Pavlov for the responsibilities. Most cities at 30,000 people have at least 6 to 7 people in that office alone. So we're doing that there. We're doing it at Streets and Parks. I'm taking on extra responsibilities. And if I may, if I could add into that right now, you know, there's been some questions about public safety director. I'm not the only mayor in this city's history that has decided to save monies by not hiring a public safety director. The public safety director actually came about during the last administration under Mary Wolf, and she hired Mike Hudak. It cost the taxpayers approximately $100,000 for benefits and salary. So what I decided to do, like Steve Capelli did, and Mike Rafferty did, and Phil Preziosi did, they didn't fill the position, and they took on that responsibility. And by us doing that, we've saved over $1 million in the past 10 years. And there's something that I would want to hand out, and I know it's not critical of myself, but I'd like to hand this out just to give you some of my experience that I have. And I would never have taken on a role if I did not feel I could handle it, did not have experience. For instance, if you look at the city public safety director, it says oversees the services of public safety, police, fire, codes, who do not fill a position. So someone's going to say, what was your qualifications to take on the responsibilities? If you look at the qualifications of a public safety director, it's at least 4 years of college, 4-year degree. I have a doctorate degree in education, and I have coursework in criminal justice, psychology, political science, negotiations. I've taken several classes on that, and administration. And I was on city council for 12 years and was chairman of public safety for those 12 years. During this time, crime rate has decreased, and I believe we have a wonderful leader in the police department that has made some wonderful inroads in regards to that. At some point, if you have a question for Chief Young, he would be glad to give you his opinion about a public safety director. Multitasker, fiscal conservative, as I said earlier, we've saved over $1 million taking on the responsibility. I have been coached by a gentleman that deals with leadership, Dr. Larry Stout, and I was coached by a Secret Service agent and former Baltimore police officer. His initials are JSF. As a councilman, I worked with the following chiefs: Tony Evans, Bill Miller, Curly Jett, Mike Faust, John McKenna, Gary Whiteman. worked with Greg Forsman. I appointed him, and the first time in the city's history, we hired a police chief outside the ranks from the state police, and that's from David Young. I was appointed by the Pennsylvania governor to serve on the Municipal Police Officers Education Training Commission. I speak to fellow mayors about public safety a great amount of times. I meet with my chiefs, my police chief, fire chief, and codes administrator several times a week, and if you talk to them, they'll tell you that I'm on top of things. And I'm NIMS certified, and I have received firearms training at Tripoli's Triggers. And I know there's been several council people that have advocated, at least in the past, about hiring a public safety director, but you know you're going to be paying more. We have a fine chief right here. In my opinion, there's no need for him to come to a bureaucrat, and then the bureaucrat comes to the mayor to speak to me about issues. All he has to do is walk upstairs, and does it all the time. And then the last thing I want to point out, because this deals with fiscal management, I did some research this week, populations of 25,000 to 35,000 in Pennsylvania. Here are the municipalities.
Turn this thing off.
We have Norristown, 34,324, no public safety director. Bethel Park, 32,313, no public safety director. Williamsport, 29,381, no public safety director. Monroeville, 28,386, no public safety director. Easton, 26,800, no public safety director. In Hazelton, 25,340, no public safety director. I don't understand why there's individuals advocating for such a position. Chief Young, could you voice your opinion? And I think I'm finished.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Allison.
I'm sorry that you couldn't be here for the beginning of our discussion, because we made it pretty clear nobody's advocating for a public safety director. What we wanted to know was, by ordinance.
That was never said.
Yeah, that was never said.
That was never stated.
All three of us were present at the meeting, and all three of us were present at the meeting, and none of
I'm
none
sorry,
of us advocated.
I wasn't present. I don't know if you were, Mayor, but
I know in the past, there's been council members, and I don't want to get into an argument, totally, but I know in the past, there's several council members sitting here that have said we need a public safety director. I know that. But.
Publicly or to you?
Well, we're sorry if you went to a whole lot of work, Mayor Campana, but,
not really.
but, well, no, work's good.
In any case, what
Allison.
we wanted to know was, as we have it in our ordinance, which is the law, and that's why we're looking at it, because we're passing a law. And too many times we've seen where we passed a law that, or have one on the books that doesn't mean anything. And when we had our codified ordinances reviewed, we had a lot of that fluff taken off and taken out, which we don't need words in there that aren't effective or aren't being used. So we wanted, since this was brought up, we thought it was a good time to approach that particular part of the ordinance and see just what it meant. And if it doesn't mean anything, because apparently there aren't any job descriptions, so, yeah. But your qualifications notwithstanding, there aren't any job descriptions, so I guess it comes down, do we
Our
need?
administration had it. When we came in, we didn't feel like we needed one because basically I was fulfilling the position.
Yeah, and totally understandable. $100,000 is a lot of money and not something to be taken lightly. Although, I would say this, you talked about multitasking, saving money, and not filling position saving money. And this isn't to you or anybody in the administration, but multitasking saves money if it is done well. If multitasking isn't done well, you end up spending more money and you have more problems. So there is that aspect of it to also consider. But, so I guess my question was, these different directors, and if, as you well put, these communities don't have them, a lot of mayors haven't used them. Do we even need that in the ordinance?
I think that's a good question for the solicitor.
That's what I asked to begin with. Do we need these? That was my only question.
I guess I would leave it in more to say who's in charge of that department. If, for example, Mayor Campana's future successor decides, yes, we do need a department head for public safety, or we do need a department head for administration. That's why it should be left in. And also for organizational chart purposes. That if somebody comes in and they're in the finance department, well, who's my boss? They can look at the ordinance and realize, well, if there's no department head, then it's the mayor.
But see,
But
we always,
primarily, it's because in the event that a future mayor, or if Mayor Campana decides that, yes, we do need a director of public safety because we have a new chief and we have a new fire chief, both of whom are inexperienced. I want someone in there then to be able to control or monitor what's going on. So that's why I would leave it in. My recommendation would leave it in.
I can understand why you're saying that. We always, you know, in my mind, I always assumed the mayor was the CEO.
Mayor's CEO,
And that, you know,
but
having the title, is it just a title that means, it's a title means nothing? You know what I'm saying?
well, it's not a question of title meaning nothing. It's that,
If it's not a working title, I guess, is the verbiage.
you know, as mayor, he's in basic charge of the administration.
He's in charge of it, right?
He's in charge of the administration. Currently, Mayor Campana doesn't believe that these two positions should be filled.
Right.
But there may come a point, say a year from now, 2 years from now, where due to change in circumstances, he decides, yes, I should fill one of these two departments. At least then he doesn't have to come back to council with, well, we've got to re-amend the ordinance all over again. Where department head has been carried really since this form of government was created back in 71 or 72, with the title of department head, even though periodically it hasn't been filled. There's been a number of times, as far back as Mayor Coder, where there hasn't been, some of the departments have been without a department head, whether it be public safety or other departments. So it's not anything unusual currently. You know, in a historical perspective, various departments over the years have had vacancies in department head.
Okay.
I have a couple questions that are slightly different in all of this that maybe Norma you can help with. One is simply the sort of, this doesn't make any sense literally, but the idea is the same, though, kind of line of secession, not like, oh, the mayor, you know, I don't mean I'm not implying that, but I'm just saying if for some reason the mayor can't be reached and there's a city emergency, do I read this to suggest that the next person in charge is basically Stephanie Young?
Be the next department head.
The only department
Unless,
head.
the only department head, unless he designates someone else.
And that has meaningful, I mean, that's meaningful,
Obviously, in the event of an
substantive,
emergency, yeah,
an
or if,
emergency authority. In the absence of a designee, Stephanie Young is in charge of the city.
he would be the acting, you know, mayor.
Okay. And then the second question I had, just from, and this is basic, and we can go back to some of these bigger things. It seems like, as you said earlier, we have casually used the word department head to mean what is undefined here, but I'll call sub-departments.
Correct.
I.e. finance, human resources, recreation, public works, et cetera. I'm calling those sub-departments. And then under sub-departments, we may have individual positions or other sub-departments like what we were talking about with in engineering, or in the case of contracted services or something under WBT.
But the concept of department head under the optional third-class city charter law
Is the director level.
is the
department.
director level.
And I understand that. Here's
Yeah.
my little question, and this is just maybe, I don't know, the mayor can weigh on this. The one area of job responsibilities that's not reflected anywhere here that I can think of is IT. And of course, when the original that we're revising was worked out, we didn't have an IT person. And I'm just, does it naturally fall under anything, or should we, like engineering falls under public works,
To me-
specify that IT falls under,
To me, it would seem to be administration.
but as a separate sub-department or as a
Probably under HR.
sub-department?
Probably a sub, maybe under human resources, but I think it would really depend on where the mayor would want to place that person in
I
a
don't know, Mayor,
specific
if you
area.
have, I mean, what I'm thinking is we should probably amend it so it reflects, but who does the IT who does Chris report to? And so you, with what job title? Yeah. No, which of your job titles?
Administration.
Okay, so would that then suggest that we would need to add another number in whatever order we would want, that would be 1, finance and payroll, 2, human resources, 3, recreation, and somewhere in there, a number associated with IT? Let me make the motion real quick.
Or I guess, the easiest would make it number 6, I guess.
We could make it number 6 unless Bill really just wants WBT to be last.
I thought they would be first.
Yeah, I don't know. So my motion would be to add number 6, and we can discuss, and if somebody has a better idea after I throw it out there, add number 6, and is there any, what is IT? I know there are a lot of versions for IT services. Do we have wording recommendation?
Information technology.
Yeah, but no nuanced version of that? Okay, then I make a motion to add number 6, information technology. Is there a second?
Second.
Hear a motion and a second. Comments or questions on that sub-thing, and once we get out of the way, we can get to the bigger issues? Yeah.
Just a
Bailey.
question that information technologies, especially in the context that we handle it at the city, actually does strike me as more of a perhaps planning / community and economic development sort of initiative. I guess what I'm saying is, to me, we should be thinking about it a little bit harder before we just kind of willy-nilly put it under one department or another.
I mean, one, I deferred to the mayor on that, but in my mind, where I would agree with him is, much like human resources or finance serves the needs of every department, in some ways, I can clearly see, even if more of his time is associated with one particular department, information technology does serve the needs of every department on those issues.
Every
I think,
sub-department.
would be the rationale.
That makes sense to me. I can see that argument.
Okay. Other comments or questions on the motion to amend? Everybody comfortable with that as an idea? Okay. Mrs. Frank on the motion to amend.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, so we've added 6 with an amendment. That takes us back then to the ordinance and first reading as amended. Other comments or questions? Ms. Mealy?
Yeah, just a couple about, well, a few about the positions of the directors for our solicitor for Norm. Out of curiosity, if, personally, and I'll defer to the will of council on this one, but it seems to me if we're going to retain these positions as nominal positions within the city hierarchy, even if the mayor has chosen not to fill them currently, they should have job descriptions. And we should be clear on who's doing which portions of those jobs.
I agree.
Does everybody see what I'm saying? Okay. That is to say, if those positions have given roles and they are being shared out amongst the sub-department heads, then the descriptions of those roles should exist, and we should be clear on who's doing what, so that we know that all of the elements that would fall under one position if we were filling it are being taken care of elsewhere. And that also, of course, then, should anyone ever decide to appoint a director of administration or a director of public safety, allows us to have a jump start on knowing exactly what the job of that person will be when they take the position, when we put out an RFP for, a hire. So that would be my individual position. If we leave those positions on the books, I want them to have job descriptions. That said, Norm, my question is, if at some point either Mayor Campana or another mayor moving forward in the city should decide that he or she wants the head of recreation to also be the director of administration, that presumably is as legal as the mayor being not only the mayor but also the director of administration, correct?
Yeah, he could nominate anyone he wants to be the director of administration.
Got it.
And say, by the way, your duties also include, you're
Understood.
handling also recreation, or you're handling the,
Just so we know sort of what the flexibility of the position is. It is a position that could be held by anybody else within the city if someone were to determine that that was the case.
Presumably at less than full price cost.
One would hope so. I'd hope we get a deal. But, then, yeah, and just out of curiosity, I know as Mayor Campana referenced that there have been multiple periods in the city's history when the city has not had a director of public safety, despite the fact that we have one theoretically in the ordinance. This is my only experience. At some point during my time on city council, the city ceased to have an acting director of administration. Has that been the case before?
yeah. There hasn't, when Mayor Preziosi was here, and Jim Cooney became ill, there were some acting, for want of a better term, finance directors until I think Jim Crosley was appointed. And then there was a couple of others, and then there was some other gaps in there.
But so for a substantial period, I think it's been maybe 6 years since we've had a director of administration. And that's been the case in the history of the
This has
city
been about the
previous.
longest for Director of Administration. Public Safety Director has been pretty much off and on.
Yeah,
for-
it definitely
for
looked
40
like that. I
years.
mean, right, yeah. I mean, I think under Mayor Wolf was the first time we'd had one in quite a long time, and then, right. Just curious, historically speaking, sort of how we've conducted ourselves. I guess because it is a sobering thought to think of the fact that you have, if something were to happen to the mayor, or the mayor were to be taken ill, or the mayor were for some reason to step off the planet, whatever, we would have one next person in command, and then frankly, once we exhaust that option, I'm not exactly sure what happens from there. Do you know what I mean?
I understand what you're saying. If there comes a point where the mayor is unable to perform the duties for an extended period, I'd have to look at the optional third-class city charter law, because there is, I think, a provision in the statute itself of what would happen. There is a succession, I think.
It would be good to know, because if for some reason all those
Yeah, I
duties
can-
do fall to Ms. Young, then I would think that we should be making her aware of that, and that we should clarify with her that that is in fact a role that she's willing to fulfill.
I can look up those provisions and
Right.
let you know what they say. It's been a while since
You
I've
know,
looked.
it's none of my business one way or the other, but I do think that any employee who potentially runs the risk of being suddenly in charge of an entire city should be aware that that might happen. And should be prepared for it to happen.
This is where the job description comes in handy.
Right, exactly,
This is
yeah.
this is why we
Right,
should
so
have that.
all of these things, I guess, none of it is me calling into question the changes that we're
No.
contemplating this evening to the structuring of the city administration. What it is me contemplating questions that arise out of making these changes, looking at this ordinance anew, and questions, frankly, that we haven't answered and that haven't been answered in quite a long while in the city. And to my way of thinking, we should be answering them quickly, as in before the next reading.
Yeah, I can look that up and I'll let you know.
Okay. Great. And then one other thing that, that actually doesn't enter into any of the larger discussion, but an observation we did make in discussions about River Valley Transit, Williamsport Bureau of Transportation, et cetera, was that apparently Williamsport is the only municipality in the state that does not, we're one of 2 municipalities in the state that hasn't got a transit authority. And the other municipality that has, that for whom transit is not an authority, transit is a council of governments, because it's spread out over multiple municipalities. So simply something to, I guess, consider an element of discussion that we gleaned from Ms. Nagy, a solicitor for River Valley Transit and the city's insurance consultant, that there are people elsewhere doing it differently, and you know, maybe it's something that we'll need to look at the role of transit, I think, in the city of Williamsport coming up here sometime soon, now that transit is not simply a Lycoming County thing, but also a Clinton County thing. And it might behoove us to begin thinking about that now.
Absolutely. Although I would add, it's, I think, Mr. Nichols' way to respond to the lack of annexation under Pennsylvania's Constitution. It's a new way for the city to annex surrounding areas. One bus at a time. Mr.
One
Al-
CNG bus at a time.
Of course. Mr. Allison.
Just quickly, I neglected to mention, we passed this to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. So, you know, we, as Councilwoman Mealy stated, it's not, it wasn't the ordinance itself. It just brought up other questions. And I totally agree that, as our council said, we should keep it in there. Well, if we're going to keep it in there, these jobs, then they should have a job description, because how can you fill it then? How can we advertise it? And
No one's
just
being
makes
taken
common
care of.
sense.
Whether the responsibilities are being
Yeah,
covered.
right, yeah.
Other comments or questions? Mr. Anderson?
Just a note on the verbiage here. We may need to make an amendment on Section 3, Article 140.01, Duties and Responsibilities. The end of that paragraph reads, let's see, of the Director of Community and Economic Development is hereby amended to read as follows. As I understand, this is the actual amendment, so that phrase is hereby amended to read should probably be taken out, and this would be my motion for an amendment. Take that out and replace those words with the word "are" as follows.
I think that
Does
makes
that make sense?
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
I'll second that. I think a typo, but easily corrected. Any comments or questions on the amendment? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes?
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the amendment carries. Thank you for the good catch. Other comments or questions? The one thing I would want to both clarify and reinforce, there is nothing in our ordinances that involve job descriptions of directors or department heads. We all know that. When we say that we're calling for job descriptions, we're asking that those are done, and it's consistent with past calls that have been responded to. I know there's been an effort by the administration under the direction of Ms. Page to make sure that job descriptions are updated and distributed, and I know there's been a lot of work on that in that regard in the last few months. And so to have these, even if unfilled, to have these on hand that provides a number of different roles. Maybe there's a hire in the future, but in addition, it'll help us all to know, hey, who's responsible for what and when, and in the case of delegated responsibilities because of openings, then that makes it easier to make sure that all the responsibilities get
We would
delegated.
be glad to provide those additional job descriptions in the next 60 to 90 days.
Thank you very much. So, if there are no other final comments on the ordinance as twice amended in first reading, Mrs. Frank, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the ordinance carries in first reading. Next item on the agenda is resolution authorizing the City of Williamsport to purchase one of those annexation machines. Mrs. Frank, please.
Resolution authorizing the City of Williamsport to award a contract for the purchase of one MCI compressed natural gas transit vehicle.
Can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Hear a motion and a second. Mr. Nichols, how are you this evening?
Great, actually.
Fantastic.
78.
You're 78 years
63.
old?
I feel like, yeah.
Okay.
No, 78-63, 2 minutes to go. The NIT championship, Penn State's ahead.
What's the NIT?
The National
Invitational
Invitational
Tournament.
something.
I'd never heard of that. I don't think most people
If you
pay
look at the
that close
ordinance,
of
it's the
attention
NIT,
to it.
and under that's the NCAA.
It's Penn State.
It's like the JV
Yeah.
tournament.
Oh, the JV, oh, it's.
Not
okay.
really. It's the teams that don't make the main
No.
tournament can go to
I'm
the
just
NIT.
giving him a hard time.
I like
know.
Penn State.
It's a participation.
Wait. So you didn't make the NCAA tournament this year?
And, who? Houston.
Oh, they did?
Houston made it?
Yeah.
The NIT or the NCAA?
NCAA.
How'd they fare?
Yeah. Made it the second round.
Okay. Something
That's
like
all.
your football season?
Hopefully better next year. Maybe we'll see each other in Dallas
Maybe.
again.
Okay. And go by bus.
All right.
Anyway, this resolution to finalize the purchase of a CNG bus from Motor Coach Industries as being funded by a PennDOT grant, the amount of $520,000, which is a amount substantially less than what you would pay for a CNG bus. But this is considered a demo bus, and it has, we gave you the information which shows that it's 50,000 miles, service miles on it, and actually we've been utilizing it on and off for the last 2 years through the courtesy of MCI. We're recommending this vehicle to be in addition to our fleet because it's configured to have additional passenger capacity and it's well suited for our suburban routes that we've been adding, special event needs, as well as it's going to be our frontline vehicle for response for emergency needs. We're party to, I think, almost 30 different emergency evacuation response plans throughout the community, senior facilities, what have you. If we're asked to respond, we now have a vehicle that has a larger capacity to it. And also some of the routes that we have are going to save money obviously from CNG, but also will save operating dollars and the vehicle can reduce the need for a second bus because we can allocate it on a route that has a higher load factor. Anyway, the Finance Committee did review this, and I'll defer back to the chair for any questions.
Ms. Mealy?
Yep, the Finance Committee did review this and forwarded it to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. We had a rather lengthy discussion about Mr. Nichols' entire fleet and its fuel efficiency and the precise cost of CNG currently compared to gasoline. But I think, by and large, our conclusion was that this is indeed an excellent purchase price and a good savings. And the good news for Mr. Nichols, if only we could put this funding toward anything else in the city budget, is that we will not need to purchase any buses next year for the first time in a very long time. But we can't take that transit funding and use it anywhere else, more than likely, although it is possible we'll find some sort of, Mr. Nichols did say that there are, I believe, additional Tiger funds incorporated in the omnibus bill, correct?
Yes,
So-
we talked about that. I know a lot of discussion, the paper, and everybody's been reading about a bill that was signed into law, $1.3 trillion. The federal government is not very good at passing a budget, and so we've gone halfway through the federal budget year with continuing resolutions, and finally they came to an agreement to finish the year with a funding package. And when I got the information, looking just to see how transit was being funded, I did see where they did fund again a Tiger grant program. which is a very flexible program under the Federal Transit Administration, but has a lot of legs to it in terms of what you can do with those funds, and they quadrupled the amount of money funded available. So, I talked to finance, and I think that we should, the administration should work with council to see if there's a shovel-ready project or something that we can respond quickly to when those funds actually become available. So it may be a great opportunity for the city.
And Finance did ask a couple of questions that Ms. Nagy was looking into, just to see exactly how flexible the Tiger funding is, and what sorts of projects we might be able to turn it to. Other than that, as I said, positive recommendation.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Mr.
Just
Allison?
a couple of particulars. Mr. Nichols shared with us that there's 4 to 6 more buses, and the fleet will be completely converted to.
6 more to go, so not next year, but the following year 4, and then after that 2, and then we're fully.
Yeah.
But the primary part of our fleet now is probably, in terms of service miles or operating, we put them on more mileage type routes. So about 80% now is covered by CNG buses, which is saving a lot of money. In addition, the federal government did renew the rebate of 50 cents per equivalent gallon for CNG for 2017, and for us that'll mean $70-some thousand in a refund for using CNG. It's just an incredible amount of money can be saved, if more people could, go to CNG fleets. And actually, the state is doing that. They're really pushing very hard to get every transit system, and so far, they now have 29 systems that are signed on board to make the conversion.
And the other fact that relates to this particular bus is that a diesel bus lasts about 12 years, and you get about 500,000 miles.
This bus will last easily 20 years.
Yeah, so if it's only got 50,000 on it, it's going to last a long time. And
We still have a 1996 bus in operation.
Bill Wright comes out every once in a while.
Well, you have to
Burns a couple
push it,
screws.
but it's still in operation.
All right, any other comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that brings us to certificates of appropriateness for HARB. We have 2 items this evening. First, for 948 West 3rd Street, installing some signage. And for 414 Walnut Street, some Palace Green and Governor's Gold. I thought governors lived in mansions, not palaces. Including then a carved sign and ornamental straight arm signpost. Can I have a motion and a second to approve these certificates?
So moved.
second.
Hearing motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
And Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and so those certificates are approved. Next item on the agenda is accept for filing. We have the Veterans Memorial Park meeting minutes of 2/5/18, ERC committee meeting minutes of January 22nd, 2018, and HARB of 3/20/2018. Can I have a motion and a second to approve, accept those for filing?
So moved. Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and that brings us to announcements. The next regular, those are accepted, by the way. The next regularly scheduled city council meeting minute, it'll be Thursday, April 12th at 7:30 here in city council chambers. Other upcoming meetings and announcements. Tomorrow is Good Friday. City Hall will be closed. On Monday, April 1st at noon is the Planning Commission meeting. And Tuesday, April 2nd at 3:30 p.m. is ERC. Wednesday, April 3rd at 4 p.m. is the Charter Commission's meeting. On Saturday, April 7th at 2 p.m. is the Government Study Commission held at the Susquehanna Law Group on West 3rd Street. On Monday, April 9th at 4 p.m. is Recreation Commission. Tuesday, April 10th at 1 p.m. Finance Committee. 2:30 p.m. Public Works. 3:30 p.m. Public Safety. 6:30 p.m. Citizens Corps. That brings us to the end of our agenda this evening. Are there any comments or announcements by members of council? Mrs. Katz.
Just for us to keep in mind that John Markley is still looking for donations for the Veterans Memorial Park. Still selling bricks if anybody's interested, because he's really still trying to build that wall. So we have somebody in our own community that wants to build a wall. Okay, so he is still looking for donations.
Thank you. Other comments from members of council? Hearing none, Mayor, your administration? Thank you as well. Any comments from the general public? Please come, your name and address for the record, please, and limit your comments to items of city business.
All right, I'll try to keep it short. Samuel J. Pham, PHAM, 922 Vine Avenue, Williamsport, PA. I'm a student at Penn College. I'm addressing the council and also, is there a police representative today? Someone from the police department? I wanted to comment about PCD patties or our Penn College Black Party annually happens. I have some grievances about it, mostly on the city council and also on the police department side. I understand the permit was not issued to this. I was not at the house or not at the address of that one that applied for it. However, I'm on that street. And I wanted to address it because of the fact that the event was basically people come from all across to visit our friends from students, and they canceled it basically less than 12 hours before the event was to start, which I find is kind of unacceptable because people should be given due notice before you want to cancel something, especially when they go through weeks of permit process. I was not part of the filing for that. However, as someone who lives on the block and enjoys that and going and hanging out with my friends and seeing everybody from past graduates and coming back, that was a major, disadvantage of the police, the police and all. And then also when the police department did show up to close down the event, so they attempted to close down the event. We were greeted basically by police coming at us, blocking one side of the street off on a one-side only parking lane for causing disturbance and basically interrupting the flow of traffic. When really the biggest threat to traffic was the police cars standing on the opposite side, which you can't even park on regularly, shaking pepper spray cans and unholstering tasers, and just kind of just walking around menacing and telling people to get off someone else's property. I was accused of trespassing on my friend's house. So I have those grievances about that, but basically, I would kind of like to propose 48-hour notice for people who have to be denied before a permit process before the event's scheduled to start, because that was kind of unacceptable, I think. People should have a right to know whether the events can be canceled ahead of time so they can adjust arrangements. Ideally, I would let the event permit process happen at all, because if what's happening on private property should be allowed on private property, but that's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Other comments from the general public? James, how are you this evening? As you know, please name and address for the record.
Yes, good evening. My name is Richard James. I live at 610 West 4th Street. I'm starting a organizing event to clean up Williamsport. A couple of days ago, I was on the Riverwalk and I was walking and I saw a lot of trash, and so I decided to pick it up. And then a week later, I came back and the section near the Maynard Street Bridge, it was filled with litter again. So then that's when I recognized that just one person is futile. We're going to need the whole city to engage in this effort. So Earth Day is coming up in April. It's going to be on a Sunday. And the Newberry people will be holding a cleanup, their annual cleanup on Saturday the 21st. So then that's when I got the bright idea, well, why don't we make this citywide and have the whole city engaged, 29,000 people picking up litter. I know that's a bit ambitious, but it can be done, except for those folks that are, physically unable. and we could get a jump on all this litter. I've been documenting it for the last couple of days and posting it on Facebook. And you won't believe the amount of trash that's out there. It's, especially if you're in a car, it's hard to see. If you're walking, it's a little bit easier, like you're on the ground, and you start to see the bottles, the trash, the cigarette butts, the all kinds of stuff. You wouldn't believe it. So I'm asking for a community-wide, community-based effort, and I'm inviting everybody in this room to come out and pick up some litter. It would be, I decided that it would be great to have it like a week-long event, and it would be designed for individuals and groups and businesses to pick their best times, their most convenient time for them to do the work. So from April 15th to the 22nd, we're asking people to come out and clean up their yards, clean up their blocks, clean up their neighborhoods from one end of the city to the other. I am working with the Newberry people. I've also talked to the Susquehanna Greenway Partnership, and we're negotiating into how we're going to clean up the Riverwalk. And also talked to the Adult Probation Office, and maybe we get some people that have to serve their community service to help in that regard. And so at this point, this is just a FYI, and I hope to be talking to some members of City Council in the next couple of weeks, public safety, and some other issues to round it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James, and thank you for your leadership on this. Other comments from the general public? Mr. Miller.
Scott Miller, 822 Tucker Street. About a month ago, I put in Freedom of Information about the snow removal. In the last 2 years, not one single property has been cited for failing to remove the snow in a timely fashion, which I had hoped it wouldn't be many, but I can't believe that there was not a single one. Secondly, I asked Ms. Frank to give you all copies of this article, and just to put it in a nutshell, on about page 4, the first 3 pages are background and history. But essentially, the Pennsylvania Environmental Defense Foundation versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania won their case, and actually twice have won their case, where money generated from fracking on state lands is to be used for certain purposes. And as you read through it, you'll find out dikes and Chesapeake Bay cleanup, et cetera, are some of the acceptable things. I hope y'all will take a moment to look through it, because I believe there's always a good thing about being the first in line with your hand out when $1.1 billion becomes available, should the Harrisburg decide to give the money back as the Supreme Court has ruled them to. The next thing I want to touch on is I read an article where a city, I don't know how big it was or if it was just a township or a borough, but they were able to eliminate their controller's office because they felt that the finance department and the treasurer's department, they divvied up those duties, and we're talking about giving titles and names and who does what. And it was my understanding through the scuttlebutt that Peg Woodring was not going to run for another term. I kind of hope she does, but if she does not, it would be the ideal time to eliminate that office completely, and just informal asking it would save the city over $100,000. And I don't know, maybe $100,000 isn't much to you. If it is not much to you, please make checks payable to Scott Miller. Next thing I want to touch on, in government, what is a lie? How is misuse of public funds defined? When does it become theft? The analogy I make is the state raised the gas tax to fix the roads. After they did that, oh, well, we got to pay the state police from that new tax money. Well, how about we get rid of that gas tax, not fix the roads, and I guess we never had state police before we had that gas tax, or fund them from what it was. You know, and I'm just using that as an analogy, but I think it's a valuable thing to look at, in as much as I do remember this body, this governmental body, increasing property taxes to pay for the dike and levee repairs, and that money was going to be saved up. And now I read in the paper, I don't know exactly how true it is, but we don't have that much money from that tax as was said to be. You know, when does it become you stole my money? And the last thing, I have one of those fancy cell phones that has a camera on it, and I'd hoped the streets and parks people would have been here, but I want to be able to have them load in so I can take a picture and let them know where the potholes are that need to be fixed. I'm told that we're supposed to have that program available so I can just go around, go through town and start reporting potholes. I know they will get an extensive list from me, but I want to make sure that there's no reason potholes are not fixed in a timely and professional manner when the season hits. Thank you. Have a wonderful Easter.
Thank you, you as well. Are there other comments from the general public? Hearing none, motion to adjourn, please.
So move.
Second.
Hearing motion and second, all in favor? Aye.